Lecrae, we're not really sure who you are. Can you remind us who you are, brother? Artist with Reach Records. We got next to him, brother KB, another artist with Reach Records as well. And then next to KB is Nate. You may or may not know Nate, but Nate actually plays the drums for the tour for Reach Records. And Nate is also a Houston native, is that right? That's what's up. And then next to Nate, we have my lovely wife, Blair Lynn. Yeah, Blair. In addition to being my wife, she also has a spoken word ministry that is awesome. And so, yeah. So we're gonna jump right into it. Lecrae, let me ask you this: what is it that makes a film like Man Up necessary, and why was this something that Reach Records thought was important to do?
Yeah, can you hear me? The reason why I think this film is absolutely necessary is because obviously we know that our culture has an idea of what it means to be a man, right? Like the world at large has an idea of what it means to be a man, but then on top of that, within hip hop culture, there's this idea of what masculinity means. And if you notice, across Western culture, there's no rite of passage into manhood. So if you go to other countries, it may be like, yo, you kill a lion, you take his heart out, take a bite, and now you're a man. But in the West, there's no rite of passage. And so we start making up what it means to be a man. So now you're like, well, I guess I'm a man, I'm 18, my voice is still cracking, and I don't know if I'm a man. And so we begin to create these things that define manhood, and some of them are, well, if you lose your virginity, now you're a man. The more women you sleep with, now you're a man. The more violent you are, now you're a man. If you fight for your respect, now you're a man. So there's all these ideas that are perpetuated from the culture as to what it means to be a man, but none of them come from the final authority on manhood, and that's the scriptures, that's God. And so when we look at the scriptures and we start looking at God's definition of what masculinity is and manhood is, it falls contrary to everything we've ever seen. So when you look in the Bible, you look at Jesus, who's the ultimate man. You don't see a selfish, self-centered, violent individual. You see somebody who's selfless, the epitome of selflessness. So if Jesus is the ultimate man, then selflessness is one of the characteristics. We see Jesus as somebody who rejected passivity, right? Like, so Adam was a passive man, but Jesus rejected passivity. A lot of men are passive. We say, oh, well, I don't feel like dealing with that. I'm not going to deal with that. But Jesus steps up to the plate, takes responsibility for the things that he didn't do wrong. And I just think ultimately, Jesus defines what masculinity is, not the culture. And when we start looking at Jesus as the ideal picture of what manhood is, then everything begins to change. And we start becoming life-giving instead of life-draining. A lot of men think I drain women for their money, their possessions, date them until I get what I want out of them. And Jesus says, no, I give life. I don't take it. I don't drain it. I give life. Amen. And it was just a whole different picture once you begin to look at Jesus versus the culture.
Dope. Nate, I want to ask you this, especially being from this area. Can you share just a little bit about just your testimony, where you grew up in Houston, and just and particularly want to hear about what were your models of manhood growing up?
Well, I grew up in South Park, and it's ironic because I grew up and I had a strong, godly father, but growing up in the hood, I really wanted to reject that because everybody else didn't have a father, or everybody else was in the situations where they were trying to find themselves and trying to find how to be a man. I had a great example, and I decided to try to be like everybody else, and that was really the influence of the neighborhood, TV, all that kind of stuff. So my influences were definitely great and strong, good on the good side and the bad side. And I fell to the bad side a little bit, and thank God for His grace and His redemption power. Because you're the right.
And so can you talk a little bit about how you hooked up with Reach Records, and then just what it's been like in terms of just having that community and examples of godly men in that community?
Divine intervention is probably the best term to use. I'm a working musician. I've been a pro for a long time, and really just one thing led to another. Show just kind of knew me in passing. I was working at the church that we were in the same church, and he just kind of threw it out there. And I was like, I kind of checked. I didn't know anything about any of these guys, so I just checked it out. Like, they look. I got a really good initial feeling, so I'm like, let me give it a shot. And man, I found a new family. Like, it's been great, and just working in the secular industry for so long, I'd have to kind of run and hide because the environment that I was in was not the environment I want to be in 99.9% of the time. And it's really refreshing to me, my wife, to be able to be around these guys and be able to have fun, be able to get in the word, and just spend 24 hours a day and feel like I'm with my brothers, It's beautiful.
Still, KB, you are married recently, right? How long have you been married?
I have been married for a good 6 months. Not bad. Year. 1 year.
A year. Okay. So in that 1 year's time, I'm sure you've gained a lot of wisdom in that 1 year. I know some people are like, 1 year? That ain't nothing. But in that 1 year, can you share what have you learned about biblical manhood through being married for 1 year?
That's a good question. Yes, I've learned a whole lot. A whole lot. Your wife serves as like a mirror to who you really are, right? Like, you don't know how selfish you are, how prideful you are. I thought I was a pretty good dude. I was like, I love Jesus, I serve people. But you really get down to the areas that Christ wants to conform you into His image in marriage. And the fact of the matter is that is God's plan for everybody everywhere. Is that when or at least when someone comes into relationship with Jesus, man or woman, doesn't matter. Manhood in its maturity is looking like Jesus. Womanhood in its maturity is looking like Jesus. And what I've learned being married,
come on,
is that you're so good, God. He wonderfully gives you this beautiful tool, all right, that expedites and also goes very deep in conforming you into the image of Jesus Christ, one step out at a time. So it's a wonderful beating. It's a wonderful beating. You grow, you love it, and you find out that God has given you this gift called marriage, not primarily for your happiness, but for your holiness, right? So, and then when you becoming holy, in it you find your happiness and your joy and your contentment. But the prime product is you looking like Jesus, and I've learned that very well being married. And I love it. Get married as soon as you can.
Amen. I don't know, brother, that picture of pounding seemed kind of painful, brother. Amen, I feel So speaking of marriage, Blair, my lovely wife, let me ask you this. From a female perspective, are there any ladies in the building? Okay. So for the sisters, can you address what is it that women can do, or young ladies can do, to either encourage biblical manhood in their brothers or discourage biblical manhood in their brothers?
All right. Well, one thing that I will say, I think the biggest way that we as women can encourage biblical manhood is to strive after being a woman, after God's heart, being a woman who is seeking to line her life up under the lordship of Christ, every area of her life.